Ever feel like you're just drowning in information, like you're not sure what to really focus on?
Yeah.
Well, today, we're diving deep into the world of educational goals and objectives to try to help navigate that sea of knowledge.
Right.
And it's not just for teachers and students either.
Yeah.
This stuff is useful for anyone who wants to learn anything effectively.
It really is. And it's fascinating, this topic.
Yeah.
Because it gets to the heart of how we learn.
Yeah.
We throw these terms around all the time, like goals and objectives.
Right.
But in education, they have very specific meanings. It's almost like a secret code for unlocking successful learning.
Okay, so let's unpack that code then.
Yeah.
Our source material, Instructional Goals and Objectives,
Yes.
makes a very clear distinction between these two terms.
Right.
They say an instructional goal is like a broad destination,
Okay.
a general statement of what someone should be able to do after they've learned something.
Right.
Like understand the stock market.
Yeah.
That's a goal, but it doesn't tell you how you're going to get there.
Exactly. That's where the objectives come in.
Okay.
And the objectives are the roadmap. They're the turn-by-turn directions to get you to the destination.
Okay.
The source gives a great example of this, taking that broad stock market goal
Right.
and turns it into a measurable objective.
Sure.
Convert the following fractions to percentages with 100% accuracy. 14, 13, 12, 23, 34.
Wow, it's a lot more specific.
Much more specific.
Yeah, it's like saying, I want to go to the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Versus like, first I'm going to pack the car, and then I'm going to take Route 66, stopping for gas in Flagstaff.
Exactly.
Objectives break down the big goal to manageable steps.
Exactly. And research actually shows that when people have those clear objectives, they're more likely to achieve their goals and feel more ownership over their learning.
Interesting.
It's about clarity, communication, and even motivation.
So it's not just about making it easier for teachers to plan their lessons.
Right.
It's about empowering the learners to actually take charge.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah.
Our source material dives into this whole hierarchy of learning outcomes.
Yes.
Starting with these big, grand aims of education.
Yeah, you can think of those aims as those guiding stars.
Okay.
The big picture vision of what education should achieve
Right.
for individuals
Right.
and for society as a whole. Things like developing informed citizens, promoting lifelong learning,
Right.
fostering those critical thinking skills
Yeah.
that we need to navigate this complex world.
Which we need now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but then it gets more focused, right?
Yes.
How do those grand aims translate into what happens in a classroom?
Well, it's like a waterfall,
Okay.
cascading down from those lofty aims to the more practical level.
I like that visual.
Yeah, so those aims influence the curriculum goals and objectives
Okay.
that are developed by schools and systems.
Right.
And these focus on what knowledge and skills and values students should be gaining at different grade levels and in different subjects.
Makes sense. So then finally we get to those very specific instructional goals and objectives
Yes,
that teachers would then tailor for their own classrooms.
precisely.
So it all starts with those big ideas, but then it gets refined
Right.
to meet the needs of the individual learners.
Exactly. And understanding that connection helps you to see how even the smallest lesson plan
Wow.
fits into the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve through education.
That's pretty powerful.
It's all connected.
It is all connected.
Yeah.
Now, one thing our source really emphasizes
Yes,
is the power of specificity when writing those instructional objectives.
absolutely.
The more precise you are, the more likely you are to achieve what you set out to do.
Think about it this way. If you're aiming at a target,
Okay.
you're much more likely to hit that bullseye.
Yeah.
If you have a clear sightline and you know exactly where you're aiming,
Right.
same goes for learning.
Yeah.
Specificity forces that clarity of thought.
It helps communicate those expectations to the learners
Right.
and makes it much easier to evaluate whether or not learning has taken place.
And our source lists a bunch of benefits to back this up.
Yeah.
Increased accountability, simplified sequencing, even making the whole evaluation process more efficient.
Right.
But I'm guessing there's some folks who push back against being too specific.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, does that stifle creativity or something?
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay.
The source acknowledges that some educators worry
Yeah.
that overly specific objectives can be really time-consuming to develop.
Right.
And might even lead to a focus on rote memorization
Okay.
or trivial skills at the expense of deeper understanding.
Interesting.
So some people feel like it turns learning into a checklist rather than an exploration.
Right. Yeah, so it's a balancing act then.
It is, yeah.
I'd love to hear what our listener thinks about this, by the way.
Yeah.
Do the benefits of those super clear objectives
Right.
outweigh the potential downsides? It's an interesting debate for sure.
It is an interesting debate.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
This whole world of learning.
Yes.
It isn't just about cramming facts into our brains.
No, not at all.
Right. It's also about feelings and attitudes.
Absolutely.
And even physical skills.
All of that.
That's where this concept of domains of learning comes in.
Yes.
Our source highlights 3 main domains.
Right.
Cognitive, affective, and psychomotor.
Mm-hmm.
They all play a role in how we learn and grow as humans.
For sure.
Okay, break it down for us. What do these domains actually mean?
Well, the cognitive domain is the one we often think of first.
Okay.
It's all about those knowledge and thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being able to understand concepts, analyze information,
Yeah.
solve problems. That's all cognitive.
Yeah.
The source gives an example. Understanding how primary elections work,
Mm-hmm.
that's a cognitive skill in action.
Okay.
Then you have the affective domain, which focuses on the emotional side of learning.
Oh, interesting.
You know, things like developing a love of reading,
Okay.
appreciating art, having a strong sense of responsibility.
Right.
All of these fall under that affective umbrella.
Interesting.
It's about how learning makes you feel.
Yeah.
And the source highlights that even something as simple as enjoyment in reading
Okay.
is an effective objective.
Wow.
It's not just about being able to decode the words.
Right.
It's about cultivating a positive attitude
Yeah.
towards the act of reading itself.
Yeah.
You know?
This makes me think how important a good teacher is.
Oh, absolutely.
Someone who can make learning fun and engaging.
Right.
And not just a chore.
Exactly.
And then we have the psychomotor domain,
Yeah.
which is all about physical skills and coordination.
Right. And that could be anything.
Okay.
From playing a musical instrument
Right.
to mastering a sport.
Uh-huh.
Even something like skillfully laying bricks, which is an example from our source.
Okay.
It's about developing those fine and gross motor skills
Yeah.
that allow us to interact with the physical world.
So in the real world, I'm guessing
Yeah,
most learning probably involves a mix of all 3 of these domains.
absolutely.
It's not like we neatly categorize every skill.
Right.
Learning to play the piano
Oh, perfect example.
is a great example of this, right?
Think about it. You need those cognitive skills
Uh-huh.
to understand music theory.
Right.
You need affective skills to appreciate the beauty of the music
Yeah.
and stay motivated to practice.
Right.
And then those psychomotor skills to actually hit the right keys and produce those sounds.
So it's all intertwined.
That's all intertwined, yeah.
That makes learning very complex.
It is complex, yes.
If I'm setting learning goals,
Mm-hmm.
whether for myself or for someone else,
Right.
should I be trying to hit all 3 of these domains all the time?
Well, it can feel overwhelming,
Yeah.
but the key is to start by figuring out which domain is most important
Okay.
for the specific skill or knowledge that you're focusing on. Sometimes the focus will be primarily cognitive,
Okay.
like if you're learning historical facts.
Right.
Other times, the affective domain might be crucial,
Uh-huh.
like if you're trying to foster a love of reading in young children.
Yeah.
And of course, for something like learning to cook or play a sport,
Right.
the psychomotor domain will take center stage.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Focusing on the domain that's most relevant to
Yeah.
what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
How do we go beyond those basic skills or facts?
Yeah,
How do we unlock that higher level thinking
right.
that really allows people to analyze,
Yeah,
to evaluate, and to create?
right.
Our source talks about this too.
Yes, this is where we move beyond just knowing stuff
Okay.
to actually being able to do something with that knowledge.
Right.
And to help us get there, we can turn to tools like Bloom's taxonomy and other similar frameworks.
Right.
And these are like maps for the cognitive domain, showing us the different levels of thinking.
Okay, Bloom's taxonomy rings a bell.
Yeah.
But I need a refresher. It's like a pyramid, right?
Exactly.
With different levels of thinking skills.
It is. And Bloom's taxonomy
Okay.
and other systems like Anderson-Kraft Hall
Okay.
and Marzano-Kendall
Okay.
help us classify those cognitive skills,
Right.
starting with that basic recall of facts at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and then moving up to more complex processes
Like-
like being able to apply knowledge in new situations,
Right.
analyze information, evaluate arguments,
Yeah.
and even create something totally new.
So it's about pushing past just remembering information
Yes.
and actually using it in a meaningful way.
Right, and that's where those aha moments come in. You know,
Right.
when you suddenly connect the dots and understand something on a deeper level,
Yes.
those are the moments that make learning truly rewarding.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Those are the moments that make it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. And those aha moments are much more likely to happen. Right.
When we're actively engaging with information and pushing ourselves to think critically.
Yeah.
Not just passively absorbing facts.
I agree.
And so understanding these higher order thinking skills is crucial for creating learning experiences that spark those moments of insight.
Okay, so our source also points out that there's this often overlooked domain, the affective domain, and they mention how challenging it can be to identify and measure those affective objectives.
Absolutely.
Why is that? And why does it even matter?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and it gets to the heart of what we value in education.
Okay.
It's easy to measure things like test scores and grades, but how do you measure a student's curiosity? Or their resilience? Or their love of learning?
That's a good question.
You know, these are intangible qualities. But many would argue they're just as important as academic knowledge.
So if we're trying to develop well-rounded individuals,
who are not just knowledgeable, but also passionate and resilient and engaged. We need to figure out how to cultivate those qualities.
We do.
But how do we do that if they're so hard to pin down and measure?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It requires us to shift our thinking about assessment.
Okay.
Instead of relying only on those traditional tests and quizzes, we need to find more creative ways to observe and measure students' attitudes and their values and those underlying dispositions that drive their learning.
So I'm starting to see now how this all ties together.
Yeah.
It's not just about what you know, but also how you feel about learning.
Yeah.
And how that impacts your ability to actually use what you've learned.
It's the whole picture.
Yeah, it's not just about checking boxes.
No, not at all.
Recognizing that learning involves the whole person.
Absolutely.
Not just their intellect.
Right.
Is key to creating truly effective learning experiences.
For sure.
And that brings us to the nitty-gritty of actually writing those effective objectives.
Yes.
Those building blocks of any learning journey.
Absolutely.
Our source lays out some really helpful guidelines for this crucial step.
They do.
Okay, let's get into the practical stuff.
Yeah.
I'm ready to hear those guidelines.
Let's do it. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of educational goals and objectives.
Yes.
In part 1.
Right.
We really explored those foundational concepts, the types of goals, the power of being specific, the 3 domains of learning, and those higher order thinking skills that really elevate learning. Now let's roll up our sleeves and get practical.
Yes, let's talk about how to put all this knowledge into action.
Okay.
Our source material gives us some great guidance on how to write effective objectives, those clear targets that can really drive learning forward.
Absolutely.
They emphasize using these key components that we talked about before.
Yeah.
The behavior, the conditions, the criterion of mastery, and that often overlooked stability component. Break those down and see how they work in real life.
Absolutely. So let's start with the behavior.
Okay.
The heart of any good objective.
Right.
This describes what the learner should be able to do as a result of the instruction. The trick here is to use strong action-oriented verbs that are observable and measurable. So instead of saying students will understand fractions, we might say students will be able to add and subtract fractions with 80% accuracy.
Okay, I'm seeing how that shift in language makes a big difference.
It does.
It's about focusing on actions we can actually see and measure.
Exactly.
Not just vague ideas.
Right.
Our source provides a whole toolbox of these action verbs.
Yeah.
Identify, analyze, design, evaluate.
It's a good list.
It is a good list. It's like we're equipping ourselves to build really effective objectives.
Exactly.
Once we've nailed down that desired behavior, then we need to think about the conditions under which that behavior should be demonstrated.
Right. This adds that context and clarity to our objective.
Right.
It ensures we're assessing the skills we actually intend to measure.
Okay.
For example, if we're teaching students to solve math problems, we might specify whether they'll be allowed to use a calculator or a formula sheet.
Yeah, it's like setting the stage for the learning.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
The conditions help tailor the objective to the specific learning environment and the resources that will be available.
Yeah, it ensures everyone's on the same page.
Right.
And then we have that criterion of mastery.
Okay.
This one tells us how well the student needs to perform
Right.
to demonstrate they've actually mastered the objective.
Okay.
And this might be expressed as a percentage, a number of correct answers, or a specific quality standard that we set.
So instead of just saying students will be able to write a poem,
right,
we might say students will be able to write a poem that includes at least 3 metaphors and follows a consistent rhyme scheme.
Exactly.
We're setting a clear bar for success.
Precisely. And that clear benchmark makes it so much easier to assess whether or not students are meeting that objective.
I like that.
And finally, we have that stability component.
Okay.
This one often gets overlooked, but it's crucial for ensuring that learning sticks and can be transferred to new situations.
Right.
So it asks, will the student be able to retain this skill over time?
Okay.
Will they be able to apply it in different contexts?
This makes me think about learning to ride a bike.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about being able to ride in a straight line in an empty parking lot.
Right.
It's about being able to navigate different terrains, traffic, weather conditions.
Absolutely.
It's about developing a skill that lasts.
That's a perfect analogy, right?
Yes. And to achieve that level of stability, we have to design learning experiences that go beyond those short-term gains.
Right.
We have to move past rote memorization and that surface-level learning.
Right.
And focus on helping learners connect with the material.
Yes.
On a deeper level.
Yeah.
We want them to truly understand the why behind the what.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This brings us back to those 3 domains of learning.
Yes.
And how crucial it is to consider all of them.
Absolutely.
When crafting our objectives, it's not just about the cognitive skills.
Right.
We have to think about those affective and psychomotor skills, too.
Think of it like a chef.
Okay.
Creating a delicious and well-balanced meal.
Okay.
You need all the right ingredients in the right proportions.
Yeah.
To create something that's truly satisfying and nourishing.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights how we need to approach learning with the same kind of thoughtfulness and care.
Right.
And speaking of nourishing,
I'm getting hungry for more knowledge.
I hear you.
When we come back, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
With some final thoughts on how to put all of this into practice.
Right.
And make those learning goals a reality.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We've been on quite a journey exploring this world of educational goals and objectives.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
How they work, why they matter.
Right.
And how to actually craft them effectively. Now, in this final part, let's talk about how to put all this knowledge into action.
All right.
And turn those learning goals into a reality.
That's the crucial step, right?
It is.
Taking all that theory and making those real-world results, that's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens.
Yeah, and our source material offers some great advice on this.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to validating and prioritizing our goals.
Right. Remember how we talked about that before?
Yes.
It's not enough to just jot down some goals and hope for the best.
No.
We have to be intentional.
Intentional and strategic.
And strategic.
Yeah.
So how do we go about validating them?
Well, the source suggests seeking feedback from experts, colleagues, or supervisors.
So it's like having a sounding board.
Yes, a group of trusted advisors who can offer different perspectives and help us ensure that our goals are both relevant and achievable.
Makes sense.
And this might involve casual conversations, sharing our goals in writing, or even formally presenting them to a group for feedback.
It makes sense because sometimes we're so close to our own goals that it's hard to see the big picture.
Absolutely.
Having that outside perspective can be so valuable.
Very valuable.
Okay, so once we've validated our goals, then what?
Well, that's where we need to decide which goals are most critical and focus our energy on those first.
So how do we do that?
Well, it's helpful to think about the impact each goal will have on our learning journey.
All right.
So which ones will have the biggest payoff?
Right.
Which ones will open up those new possibilities and lead to further growth?
It's about being strategic with our time and energy, right?
Okay.
We can't do everything at once, so we have to choose wisely.
And this is where that concept of SMART goals comes in.
Oh, SMART goals. Yeah, I've heard that acronym before.
Yes.
But I always need a reminder what it stands for.
Yeah. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable,
right,
relevant,
okay,
and time-bound.
Okay, all those criteria.
Yes, and using these criteria helps us create goals that are well-defined,
right,
actionable, and much more likely to lead to success.
It takes the guesswork out of it.
It does.
So a SMART goal might be something like, by the end of this month, I will be able to write a 500-word essay on the history of the internet using at least 3 credible sources.
That's a great example.
Does that hit all the criteria?
He does.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to my interest.
Yes.
And has a clear deadline.
Perfect.
By setting SMART goals.
Yes.
We're not just increasing our chances of success.
Right.
But also making it easier to track our progress.
Exactly.
And celebrate those wins along the way.
Those little victories.
Yeah, those little victories.
Yeah, they can keep us motivated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and on track.
Speaking of motivation,
yes,
let's not forget the importance of that affective domain in all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Our source pointed out how challenging it can be to measure those affective objectives.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean we should just ignore them, right?
No, not at all.
Emotions play such a huge role in learning.
They do.
If we're not interested and engaged and motivated,
yes,
it's going to be so much harder to reach our goals.
It will be.
So how do we tap into that affective domain?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And make sure our hearts are really in it.
How do we keep that fire lit?
How do we keep that fire lit? Right.
Yeah.
I think it starts with choosing goals.
Yes.
That are personally meaningful to us.
Absolutely.
Things we're genuinely passionate about or curious about.
For sure.
When our goals are aligned with our values and interests, we're much more likely to be invested in the learning process.
It's like the difference between eating a meal because you have to and eating a meal because you're truly enjoying it.
Right.
When we're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
It feels like an adventure.
It does.
And that sense of excitement can make all the difference.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about finding that spark.
Yes.
That thing that makes you want to learn and grow.
Absolutely.
And part of that might be finding ways to make learning more fun and engaging.
Oh, for sure.
You know, this could involve games and simulations, hands-on activities, or even just connecting the material to our own lives and experiences in a really creative way.
Exactly. No one wants to be stuck with dry textbooks and boring lectures all the time.
I agree.
Learning should be challenging, but it should also be enjoyable and inspiring.
Right.
And when it is, the knowledge is much more likely to stick with us.
It all comes down to that, doesn't it?
It
Not just gaining the knowledge,
right,
but also holding on to it.
Yeah.
Using it in our lives, letting it shape who we are and how we see the world.
I love that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage our listeners to think about the goals that they've set for themselves.
Yes.
Whether they're related to your education, your career, your personal life.
Right.
Ask yourself, are these goals aligned with my values?
Good question.
Are they challenging but still achievable?
Yeah.
And most importantly, are they bringing me joy?
If the answer to any of those questions is no, it might be time to reassess and make some adjustments.
Good advice.
Remember, learning is a lifelong journey.
It is.
It's never too late to set new goals, explore new paths, and discover the joy of mastering something new.
So keep learning, keep growing,
and
keep diving deep.
Keep diving deep
into those things that truly light you up.
I love it.